Worry and anxiety have a way of creeping into our lives. Often we find ourselves controlled by them, whether it's the pressure to succeed, the fear of the unknown, the burdens that we carry, and the burdens we carry for others. It can be a heavy weight. And the reality is, when we try to manage these anxieties on our own, we can find ourselves feeling overwhelmed, exhausted, and even defeated. And maybe you felt that way before. Maybe you feel that way right now. In a world that's riddled with worries and anxieties, 1 Peter 5:7 throws us a lifeline. God invites us to cast all our anxieties on Him. And this verse is a breath of fresh air. Not only does God care for us, He wants to help us. And in this video, we're going to explore what 1 Peter 5:7 means. And I believe this verse will offer you hope and encouragement, and will help you see God's love for you and experience His care. Let's start by looking at what it says. Cast all your anxieties on Him because He cares for you. 1 Peter 5:7. As we start, I want to briefly look at what led Peter to write these words. This will help us better understand the depth of this verse and see how it applies to our lives today. The Apostle Peter wrote this letter late in his life to encourage those who are facing persecution because of their faith. And the message he gives them is to stand firm on the gospel and remember what Jesus has done for them. You see, following Jesus had become increasingly difficult and costly for the early church. And Peter was no stranger to the trials these Christians were facing. He'd been flogged, he'd been beaten, he'd been thrown in prison multiple times. And he writes this from his personal experience to encourage them. God will come through, and He cares deeply for them. And as this letter ends, he gives his readers some words of encouragement, as they must have been overwhelmed with the burdens of the world. In 1 Peter 5:6, he says, "Humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that He may lift you up in due time." In other words, we must not seek our own glory, and rather accept the work of submitting and serving those around us. This is the goal and the responsibility of Christians. And yet, doing so can also lead to difficulties in this life. Peter knows this, and that's what leads him to this next piece that he writes of incredible hope and encouragement. So let's take a closer look at 1 Peter 5:7 to see what it holds for us today. Now, to better help you understand the meaning of this verse, we're going to break it down into two different sections. And Peter starts off by saying, cast all your anxiety on Him. You see, the pressures and burdens of this life are heavy and difficult. And when we try to carry them on our own, we find ourselves weary. But God provides His people a better way. Jesus said, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, my burden is light." Jesus invites us to be yoked with Him, and in this way, we aren't shouldering the burdens ourselves. Jesus is doing the heavy lifting for us. And similarly, casting our cares or our anxieties on Him means that we are moving from trusting our knowledge and our own abilities to trusting God and resting in His provision. And this image of casting our worries upon God is fitting. We don't just tell God our worries, we cast them. We throw them onto Him. We don't need to sugarcoat them or pretend that we have more faith than we really do. God is willing and capable of carrying our most heavy burdens. So get rid of your worries, throw them onto God, because He is our burden carrier. And why does He do this? You might be asking, why would God do this? Well, that's what the next part of this verse says. Because He cares for you. Peter tells us why God is willing to carry our burdens, and it's because He cares for us. Our God isn't an impersonal God that simply wants our subservience. No, He wants a relationship with you. He deeply cares for you and what you are going through. And one of the most incredible moments in the entire Bible is when Jesus wept. He's showing deep empathy for His people, because He's not a distant God that doesn't care about our problems. No, He's deeply invested in you. He cares about you in a way that you and we can't even fathom. He weeps with us. He doesn't just look at your problems and think, man, they should just get over it, deal with it, move past it. It's not really that big of a deal. Even though he knows that what we're facing is temporary, what he does instead is he chooses to sit with us. So we can cast all our worries, we can cast all our anxieties on him because he cares for us. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. That sounds great to cast all my worries and anxieties on God, but how am I supposed to actually do that? And so I want to end by looking at some practical ways that we can apply this verse to our everyday lives and faith. And the first way we can give our worry to God is to pray continually. You see, prayer is how we give our worries to God, each one of them. We don't need to sugarcoat them. We don't need to downplay our pain. We can simply tell God what we are feeling, what we are worried about, what we are going through. And we don't pray just once, we pray continually. Each time a worry comes up, we turn around and we give it straight back to God. And this might be a daily or even an hourly or maybe even every few minute practice. Each time we face a trial, we give it to God. Prayer is our lifeline. And when you find yourself worrying, when you find that anxiety creeping up, pray. If you're struggling with how to pray, I've got some great resources that I've written that I've put down below in the description. But when you face anxieties, the first thing we should do is turn to God. And the second way that we can give our worries and anxieties to God is to remind ourselves of what is true. When we face trials and challenges, it's tempting to stop looking at and trusting God. We tend to focus on what's right in front of us and the fear that it's bringing. And that's why it's so important that we make sure it's a regular practice that we remind ourselves of the promises of God. In those moments, we must continually tell ourselves, He is with me. He cares about me. He will sustain me. He loves me. He will get me through this. Because often our worries and our anxieties overwhelm us, and we need to fight back against these untrue thoughts. And turning to verses like 1 Peter 5:7 can be powerful reminders of what God has done for us and will do for us. But I would also encourage you to check out the Psalms. When you're facing that worry, turn to the Psalms because this can be powerful reminders of God's care for us and how we can trust Him. And finally, the way that we can deal with our worries and anxieties and give them to God is to allow others to encourage us. In this passage, Peter is reminding and encouraging Christians who are facing incredible hardships that there's power in community in doing life together. And I see time and time again, when someone faces something difficult, what they do is they withdraw. But the reality is we need each other, especially in our hardest seasons. And sometimes you need help casting your anxieties on God. You need someone to lift you up, to lift you out of those worries so that you can see through them. And that's the beauty of Christian community. Not only do you have a God that cares about you, but you have people beside you that are helping you and encouraging you. Listen, God cares about you. He cares about what you're going through. He cares about what you're facing. And I want you to think about that for a minute. The creator of the universe has a vested interest in you. Therefore, because of that, you can cast all your anxiety on him and he will sustain you and give you peace that passes the understanding of humans. And I encourage you to take some time today to reflect on this verse, to give your worries to God and to step into the life that he has for you, because he loves you and he cares for you. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that it challenged and encouraged you in your life, in your faith. I hope that it helped you see how much God cares for you and sees what you're going through. If it did, would you leave a comment down below letting me know your thoughts? And also don't forget to subscribe to this channel so you can stay up to date on future content that's coming out. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.